Jupiter has moved into the 8th degree of Aries. Jupiter, of course, is that within us that expands our lives. And it goes hand in hand with touching everything to make it grander and wealthier and richer. That's how we expand our sense of abundance in the world. And we're talking about Jupiter in Aries here, so a lot to do with personal freedom, personal assertiveness. I want it, so I'll have it. Is Jupiter in Aries like? A lot of self-confidence. Hard to think of a symbol in the zodiac with more expression of self-confidence than Jupiter in Aries. And as it passes through each of the Sabian degrees, going forward and then back through some, forward again and back through some, it touches all of the Sabian symbols, learning more about itself, learning how it can do what it can do. And the overarching principle of Aries is clear to us. We know Aries well, but the comings and goings, the nuances, the backwards and forwards within that overall dynamism, we're exploring through looking at the Jupiter placement at each Sabian symbol. And when it comes to the 8th symbol, we've got a rather interesting lesson that needs to be learned that isn't totally associated with Aries, not totally associated with Jupiter. It's kind of something that really does need a little bit of thought. And when we think it through, we'll find that it is in keeping with the general thrust of Jupiter in Aries, going for what it wants with a clear expectation and confidence to get it. However, the 8th degree of Aries, the large hat with streamers flying, facing east, spiritual guidance and protection. And this is where we learn to balance passionate enthusiasm with judicious caution. Being open and sensitive to higher energies requires a wisdom that the immature person has not developed. Protection is required to limit psychic forces until sufficient development of consciousness has occurred. Guidance is advised so the source and implications of the wisdom of the East may be assimilated fully. So, a key phrase here, half-hearted warriors die, as do reckless ones. Now, we've got the half-hearted warriors die thing very well sorted out with Jupiter and Aries. They don't do things half-heartedly. They've got an on-off switch when it comes to whether I'm doing it or not. If they're not doing it, they're not doing it. If they're doing it, they're involved. They're focused, energetic, and so on. However, that brings with it the risk of mistakes and error of direction and winding people up so they get you back and being too forceful until you come across something that's more forceful than you with a bit of a grudge against you for trying. That's something we see in life, isn't it? And so there's this other side of the wisdom. Reckless warriors also die. And we're discussing warriors with this. The warrior of self against self. The warrior code is a spiritual principle. And we have to check that this urge we have to project ourselves into life assertively is not shadowy. It's not at someone else's expense. It's not a bully. That's one part of this. And it's not mistaken. It's not underplanned. The trust we have for our spontaneous urges, very strong in Aries. Aries is a very sort of fast, immediate, impulsive energy, isn't it? And yet, well, because Jupiter's there, that's going to expand that and make all of our movements little bit exaggerated, and therefore the potential for messing up really deeply occurs here. And how we guard against that, the protection that we need to make sure we don't mess it up too much, is given by two principles. One is a protection against psychic forces. What that means is that the energetic field that we're giving out, really focused on a particular goal, whether or not somebody's in our way doesn't seem to matter very much. That generates the amount of kickback that you'd think. And that takes the form of psychic forces attacking us, actually, at times. And that can be embodied through somebody's angry glance at you, or it could be a punch in the face, but it's going to be embodied. And when psychic forces attack you, sometimes you don't know. It could be much more subtle than a punch in the face. So, for example, if somebody's gossiping about you elsewhere, especially now in the days where they can post some comment online, that may be a significant attack. Somebody who is aiming to stop you in your tracks, come what may, because they've got a grudge against you. That kind of thing does happen. It certainly happens to most of us at least once in our lives. And we might not be able to defeat the person responsible for the energy. And really we don't want to try. What we want to do is make sure that that shifts, that we're protected against that psychic attack, the dark arrows of somebody wanting to do something to you that you don't want to happen. They want to act against you simply for the joy of causing you discomfort. Those kind of forces we do need to guard against. And guidance is required for us to learn how to do that. It's very difficult to know most of the techniques for how to protect yourself from psychic attack. And this is the image that is being taught to us in Aries 8. Let's think about the expression also within which Aries 8 appears. It's the 5 degrees from 6 to 10, and that expression is called drive. And Aries is a driving force. Jupiter makes it drive further and faster and bigger and more dangerously, as I've mentioned. So here we have somebody saying, okay, if you're driving force forward, then you need guidance and you need protection, or you'll come a cropper. It won't work and you might suffer. So a cautionary note here. In Aries, a cautionary note, something unusual. Where do you get the guidance? There's any number of people saying they'll guide you as long as you pay them money for the workshop. There are books written. There's all manner of different offers. How do you know whether or not it's a good idea to take those offers? Because of all the avenues likeliest to give you a dose of psychic attack, going to a workshop and putting yourself under the guidance of somebody who's not yet there themselves, that's the likeliest to cause you that level of problem. Or if not the teacher, then somebody amongst the student body. So when we're actually looking for guidance, we're putting ourselves to some extent in harm's way in order to find how to protect ourselves from being in harm's way. And that lovely paradox can be enough to open up the facility within yourself to distinguish between proper guidance and a red herring. It's a lovely phrase, a red herring. Herrings smell and red is bright. And that's what a lot of the teachings that are available are. They're red herrings. They're bright and they demand our sensory input. They give us lots of things to think about, lots of promises of what you can do. And I have heard so much rot spoken by people that have read a book on how to practice magic, and they think that means they can do it. And that's the kind of thing that we need to guard against, that kind of casual approach to something that needs to be taken very seriously. And Aries doesn't do that very well. Jupiter in Aries really doesn't do that very well at all. Caution, guidance, doesn't really like that. And here we have a crux point, a turning point for Aries, for us generally, is that unless and until you understand that you must have guidance, you must have protection, if you really want to go to the heights of spiritual attainment, and even worldly attainment, it's the same thing, you must take that on. So, for example, if there is psychic attack coming your way, visualize a field of light around you. That will guard you from it. Go to bed with a pyramid of light around your bed when you sleep. Don't look people in the eye if they're bullying you. Just soften your glance and focus elsewhere. Even as you look at them, you don't have to focus on them. And if that doesn't work, you don't have to listen to what they're saying. Just get out of their way. That's a protection. Where it's not to do with confrontation, challenge. It's to do with just making yourself transparent to their energies. And there's a more advanced technique where you can just turn their dark arrows around and have them feed you. Anyway, so protection, guidance, that's a necessary stage of our evolutionary development.